Welcome back to Tempo, a podcast brought to you by me, Ollie Whitfield, and VanillaSoft. Now, of course, as we've released a bunch of these episodes in one go, a couple of these things might have happened a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months ago, but not too far away. There was a very big event that we went to, that we've been to before. Probably a lot of you have heard of or been to as well. And I wanted to bring a first-timer from our team who has been to the event. He's never went to this one before. And I wanted to ask Steve all about it. So before we do that, who is Steve? Well, Steve, nice to have you on the show. How are you, sir?
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm good. Sunny outside for once. We've had the England and Seattle style weather here in eastern Pennsylvania, so it's nice to see the sun for the last couple of days.
Well, I'm glad for you. I have, as I look over my camera, grey and it looks like some rain. And about 20 minutes ago, it was broad and sunlight. So, England.
As with every change is always the constant.
As it is. All right. So, you have joined the VanillaSoft team. How long ago was that?
That was a couple months ago, back in mid-December.
Couple months. Okay. So 4 or 5 months. Good stuff. All right. Now, LeadsCon is what we're going to be talking about for the majority today. Now, what did you know about that event? Have you heard of that before joining the team here?
Actually, no, I had not. I've been primarily, I'll talk a little bit more about background later, but I've been primarily in the B2B world, especially on the data side. So LeadsCon was a very new experience for me.
Okay, so maybe let's do some of your background then, because I obviously, similarly to you, prior to VanillaSoft, had no knowledge of that event. There's obviously a million events out there in every industry, so you can't know them all. But it's one of the bigger ones, in my estimations anyways. The big 2 or 3 that I can think of outside of that are Dreamforce, which is Salesforce. HubSpot has Inbound, again, sales tech, martech. So as a marketer would know that, but outside of that, LeadsCon is pretty big. But before we go right into that, let's do some of your background so that we can see how closely alike we are on that. So you have a heavy B2B background. Tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, I do. So prior to kind of even getting out of college, I've actually always done telesales, inside sales, whatever. I started doing customer service work, surveys and things as a kid at 16 years old. Worked at a call center behind the airport here in the Lehigh Valley, and that's kind of how I started getting into talking to people on the phone and just having conversations in general. Marketing degree out of college, got into sales, mortgage business, kind of midst of the subprime boom. Transit some of the folks that I was leading there after being a IC for a bit, moved over to a new inside sales center with ADP, the payroll company right here in the Lehigh Valley. So it was a big expansion. It was a pretty exciting time for the Lehigh Valley because there was ADPs coming to town with a large office, and myself and several other leaders helped launch the insurance services vertical, the pay-by-pay product at ADP. So at like 26, 27 years old, I was part of a leadership group building out a 100+ person inside sales team. So it was really amazing experience early on in my life. Obviously had coming from that background and just doing it on my own. I knew what it was like to be in a queue, work in a queue, if you will, for so long. But it was just great getting to work alongside some really seasoned leaders and build a team from scratch. Then moved on to Dun & Bradstreet. You might be familiar with them, B2B data, of course. They were actually just at LeadsCon, shockingly to see them there. They're introducing some consumer data. Very exciting to see them there. But I was with D&B for over 8 years as a leader in various roles and teams, working everything from their basic credit products through sales and marketing data, even some of their supplier risk management products. So really enjoyed my time there, met a ton of great people. Ventured out from there into the startup world. So I've bounced around a couple different startups, most recently at HighSpot, working for Zach Miller, our new CRO here at VanillaSoft, leading a vertical there, the financial services vertical, and ultimately kind of, strange way coming home to VanillaSoft, which is my bread and butter, inside sales, call center, contact center, you name it, higher output type environment. So I'm really excited to be at VanillaSoft, though everything I was doing prior was working with mostly businesses and doing a lot of B2B data. It's exciting to be kind of coming over to the B2C side more. Not that we can't support B2B, we can, but getting a little bit more of the flavor, if you will, of the data and lead space and what it takes to be successful in the B2C world.
Very cool. So a lot of experience there, particularly as you said, feels like you've come home. Type
It
of work
does.
that we
Yeah,
do.
the beard is much grayer since the first time I started making phone calls in a call center. So I've been doing this for a really long time now. Thankfully, I still feel young at heart, but yeah, I've been in the sales game for a really long time.
I'm going to start saying that your hairline is held up much better than mine for my age. So
I
if you could
don't
advise
know.
me,
You know, it's going places. We're hoping it holds on a little bit more for a little while longer, at least. So to see what we can do.
you're doing good if you ask me. Ask me when I'm a couple of years down the line. I'm concerned, but that's for another day. So we were going to talk a little bit about LeadsCon, but
Yes.
I'd like to go back a little bit as well to other events that you might have done. So I mentioned a couple that I know of. I haven't
Yeah.
actually been to 5 I can think of I've been to in my whole career. But
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, there's not that many in Europe, to be honest. There was a sales hacker one in London many years ago. They did a tour kind of thing. I've been to the B2B Marketing Expo, which I believe does Arizona and London as well, if not some others. Beyond that, not too many. And I always found the ones that I have been to, there were more trade shows, kind of just vendors everywhere. They're not what I consider to be a proper event in many ways. I mean, if you want to buy something and you want to go, good
Right.
place to be. If you don't, you're kind of there for the networking. I would imagine if there is any, there kind of wasn't at the ones I've been to, or the keynotes, which again,
Yep.
sponsoring vendors, keynotes could be good, might not, maybe 1 year, maybe not the next. You know, kind of in the middle there. So I'm expecting a little bit of LeadsCon to be different, but what's your experience of events over the years? Do you see similar? Has it been like that for you?
Yeah, I've fortunately been to Dreamforce, Salesforce's Dreamforce, at least 6. How many times have I been there? Several times. We'll just say several times, and the World Tour events. So, fortunately, have attended those events. We've done some financial services specific events. So I've been to some various events of honestly mostly larger scale than LeadsCon, even though LeadsCon is fairly big. I think LeadsCon was promoting around 4,000 attendees and had a very large floor of vendors, and some great keynotes. So I have had some experience with some larger events for sure.
Okay, cool. So you've been to, well, rough guess that you must have been to 10 plus, right?
Yeah, I would think, yeah, over the years for sure. Not, not a terrible amount, honestly. A little bit surprisingly, but as a sales leader, it's one of those things that I guess it depends on the events and specific needs, but yeah, but I've been to over 10 plus for sure.
Okay, cool. So let's measure up LeadsCon versus some of those others. Now, it's not an apples to apples. It's not bigger equals better.
Yeah.
But what was it like when you go there? So I'm trying to build the picture in the mind of people who are considering events, maybe haven't been, or looking to go to more. Like LeadsCon, fairly significant one. I'm looking for how could you make the most of it. So what was the story of you went to LeadsCon? What happened? And I think we can maybe pick apart why did you do this? Why did you do that? How did that work? And so on.
Yeah, I think there's a couple really great things that I enjoyed about LeadsCon that might have been a little bit different than other events that I've attended. The first was their app. So the ability to network prior, send messages, set up times to meet. They very much drove the networking aspect of it, which let's be honest, I think that's probably the biggest part of this. It's just meeting people and having conversations. So I love the fact that came out way ahead of the event. We were able to set a lot of meetings just to network and have conversation with folks.
So how did that work, if you don't mind me asking? Because I've one time seen that, and it came out as you on the morning of the event, so no one had it. And it was all kind of pointless because you're all in the lobby looking at each other and your phone. It's kind of weird, but
I wish I knew the exact time frame, but I will definitely say it was more than a month before the event for sure. We were talking about how we, ourselves and the other attendees, we had a pretty good contingent of folks from VanillaSoft going of how we're going to network and just message folks that we're looking to meet, whether it be partnerships, potential clients, other vendors, you name it, right? But it came out like a month ahead. It was a really easy to use app, so I was really impressed with that part of it. Just because it was great to just have some things set up before we even got there. So I think that kind of set a good tone for me that it was going to be a good networking event, an event to just meet and have conversation.
That's pretty cool. Did you manage to meet too many people from that? Did you get?
No, yeah, absolutely.
Very popular.
I want to say I had about 7 or 8 preset, and I met all but 2. So not too bad. I was pretty actually happy with that. I think Will and Ashley and some of the other folks who were there had a very similar experience.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'll stop interrupting. What else? What else happened?
So really good setup of the event was at the Paris Hotel. I thought the layout was great. The way they had the meeting room set, the floor, the vendor floor, if you will, the booths, right, was the main focal point. And what I loved about it is they had more of a welcome networking day 1. Day 2 was all about the floor, going out, seeing the vendors, having conversations, intermixed with some of the keynotes and speakers. And then day 3 was kind of a wrap-up day. So it was a nice mix of networking plus the floor. Sometimes the events, they don't necessarily drive browsing the floor, if you will, or walking around the floor. The floor is just there, right? And there's speaking events and things going on different places in the floor, different meeting rooms. So the traffic patterns are a little inconsistent, or you're not even sure if people are really even going to walk around. This, I felt like people were really, working the floor hard. They were walking around, stopping at booths, having conversations with, asking people, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? I heard that, the whole time I was there. So I really liked the setup and the way that the flow went. The lunches and the food was great. They set up rooms for people to sit down, the big open tables. Everybody was really friendly. I must have sat with, 6, 7 different people and exchange business cards and scan badges and whatnot. So it was just a really nice event. I just felt like the networking was strong. Like, it was a good size event with a good amount of attendees, but it wasn't so big where you felt lost. I don't know. It was like that nice in-between event. It wasn't like a Dreamforce where it's just like, oh my gosh, what do I do? It felt very planned, coordinated, and with a focus on meeting vendors and networking.
Good stuff. Okay. One thing I noticed, obviously having not been to it, I always think it's good for a conference to have something photo worthy. So there's probably 1 million people took a picture of that LeadsCon sign, the massive lettering, kind of like the Hollywood Hills sign. If you don't know what I'm talking about, on the floor. Really smart.
You got me. I took a picture of it. Yes.
Yeah, and obviously everyone then posts, "I'm a LeadsCon," so you know that you're going to see that. You could probably find people you haven't met following that hashtag if they posted it.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like good collateral for the brands to use, at least, because as a vendor there, obviously we're going to post about that. Why would we not? But that's pretty cool. I always think that's a smart thing to do, because like I've been to events and there was none of that. And then obviously you see, Dreamforce selfies and HubSpot pictures and stuff like that, and you just think,
no, it was
give the collateral.
There was some of that social media presence going on for sure. Saw a couple groups walking around that had their camera crews and had their entourages, if you will. There was a gentleman who shares almost the same name as me, Troutman, who was there with an entourage and a couple other folks. So we saw some of that in the posting and highlighting of the signs and whatnot. And yeah, it was great. I think it was different for me being a first timer, where I was talking to a lot of other folks who, again, I don't know how long it's been going on, but it sounds like this was their 10th plus LeadsCon, right? Like, they go every year. There's 2 events. There's this one. There's one in the summer as well that's a little bit smaller. I think it's in Chicago this year. I'm not exactly sure, but it sounds like LeadsCon is a very consistent destination for a lot of these folks.
Cool. Okay, so I want to switch gears a little bit on you. Though keeping with, let's picture LeadsCon and what you and the team did there, but also broad strokes, big event, something like that.
Yeah.
What could you do as a salesperson, sales team when you go to an event to, I don't mean to say just baller level achievement of doing everything possible to maximize it, but what could you do to squeeze the time? Because an event is an expensive thing, time and money just to go, never mind to actually then fly and eat and stay and all that kind of stuff. So I always think there's a bit of a pressure on the person going to really maximize it. And of course, you might be tired, you might not sleep well, travel well, all of that comes into it too. You've got to go, and I think you at least have to walk around and talk to every vendor if you can. Whether that means they're buyers or not is another thing. But then there's the whole people got to stand at the booth, and if people come, they come. If they don't, they don't. You got to try and set meetings before. There might be after events and all of these things to think about. So that was a lot of random stuff. How can you make sense of it and order it And what do you do? What do you not do?
Yeah, I think if going back to the app that they had, I think that for any size business, whether you were, I ran into several smaller family insurance companies there, one or two folks attending, and you're just looking to meet some vendors. Having that app and having the floor plan and did a little bit of a description of who's attending is great. So I do think if they have the app or an app or a landing page or something for you to go to and start networking and learn about the event, I think that's first and foremost for, if you look at the individual attending, right? In this case, they've got it figured out. So to me, huge value in that. If you don't have that, which, could be like a Dreamforce, you've got 50,000 people going to the event, right? But everybody's going. It's making your presence known. It's trying to maximize your marketing and your messaging through BDRs, AEs, the marketing team, right? And having some collateral and content around who, we're attending, here's why we're attending, here's who we're looking to meet, and promoting that message as early as you can, right? And just getting it known that you're being out there. Of course, you can follow the hashtags. You can even go back and look at who attended LeadsCon last year and ask them if they're going again this year and things of that nature. But again, people need to know that you're going to be there. There was, I don't know how many booths. There was a lot of booths. So, we had a pretty good spot sort of middle back, got really good traffic flow, but there were some areas of the floor that might have been a little bit harder to get to. So you gotta make sure people know you're going to be there, and start to have those conversations ahead of time of meeting face to face. Because there is, in this world of remote and hybrid, there's a lot of value in meeting face to face. So if you can let them know, set those meetings ahead of time, whether you're got to do it through your marketing team and your own prospecting or working through the app, that's just a must. I think that probably the biggest thing that I wanted to take away, again, being new, but whether I was new or not, is partnerships. I do think meeting businesses that support your business and supporting each other and a better together message is crucial. So obviously, VanillaSoft, a lot of our clients buy leads, for specific industries, verticals, very high, very high cost and higher converting leads down to maybe more list build sources, right? So I wanted to meet who was there in the B2C space and gain those partnerships. And if one of my clients or one of my prospects asked me, hey, who do you recommend? For example, I worked for Dun & Bradstreet for almost 9 years. I did not know that they were coming out with a consumer-based product similar to what they did for Hoovers for a long time. I actually saw Rich Kinsley. Shout out to Rich Kinsley. Hopefully he gets a chance to watch this. I haven't seen him in a long time. Good friend of mine. But that's the type of thing I thought I was looking for was the partnerships, and then potentially being able to, help clients together, right? And maybe partner with some other businesses. So that was big to me, and being able to just walk the floor, make those introductions, scan badges, grab business cards. And there was time to do that. We had enough folks where we could rotate through the booth to do that. So I think that's another probably a add-on is if you're I saw a lot of booths that had 2 people. That was it. They had 2 people there. So you can't leave. You can't get up, one person I guess can get up and walk around, and you're gonna have to take, the time. I saw a couple booths with 1 person. That to me, that's just, you can't do that. You've got to be able to have enough people to work the booth and then allow folks to go out and actually walk around the floor themselves, do their networking events, attend some of the keynotes and things of that nature. So you got to have the right staff, hopefully have meetings set up ahead of time, and then, work with marketing to get that messaging out.
If I might, about the partnerships thing.
Yeah.
Something that came to mind as you were talking there. So there's 2 fronts to that: personal partnerships and whole company partnerships. Sure. I assumed you meant the second. It kind of could be both at any given point.
Oh yeah. I think the personal,
we would know an integration partner off bat. We would know this person's coming, that company's coming. So we would, if we wanted to have a conversation about something at that point, you could orchestrate it. But equally, it sounded a bit like, you didn't know your previous employer and friends there were moving into a space, so I was surprised to see them. And then you, as a person dealing with potential customers, can at some point say it's worth just filling in your own Rolodex of mental notes of, okay, if this happens, I know that these are the 3 vendors I can point toward, which doesn't have to be referral fees or integrations. It can just be useful acumen as a person who's going to deal with lots of people. And then from that point, you've got trust and credibility, and all of those things can come back around. And they as you do that introduction, or as they receive as that person receives contacts and they said, Steve sent me, you're, triggered in their mind and you may receive something back in the long run. Was it a bit of both, or were you trying to meet people who are company-wide partners?
For me, it was starting with the personal connections, right? And identifying the potential to then make introductions to our new leadership team, our new executive chairman, our new CRO, and potentially seeing if there is an actual business partnership. So I think the personal partnerships have to happen first, just two folks having a conversation about what you do and what kind of clients do you service, what's your ICP, right? Do we have overlap even? And I've had a couple of those conversations already where there's most likely potential overlap. Then of course you've got to work through the business side, the NDAs and the specifics of it doesn't make sense for us to, work across, work a partnership, if you will, of sharing potential clients and making introductions, right? So there's both aspects. I think the personal forges the way for the business. And that's what I was looking. That was probably one of my goals, if you will, was to connect with several and get some of those personal. And I did. I was very fortunate to do that.
In your career across any events, have you ever been given a directive or some kind of training as if you are just man in the booth, what is normal to say and to do?
Oh yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So I came from the world of High Spot. High Spot is, a world-class sales enablement tool and platform. I attended Dreamforce and a couple World Tour events and then a couple industry-specific events with them. In fact, I probably did more events with High Spot in the shorter time that I was there than maybe any other company. And yes, they were very specific about branding and messaging and how to introduce the product and things of that nature. So yes, it wasn't necessarily like where we had a training and we're doing role plays, but like specifically like what message are we trying to convey at this conference to this audience? So we attended some financial services specific events, right? Like our messaging to them may be very different from, not very, but different from some of the other industries that we partner with. They might, financial services might be more focused on compliance, right? Doc creation, doc generation, and things of that nature. So again, how do we tailor our messaging to that? How are you prepared to talk to those topics that are most likely to come up when somebody stops by your booth and says, hey, what's High Spot? What do you do? So that you're not just giving them more of a bland general overview of the company or giving them something specific that hopefully resonates with them.
Yeah, I asked because I think it's quite interesting. There's the ones that I've been to, now granted, not the best sample size and pool. I said they were kind of okay. Some of them not as good the others. Two shining experiences that I've had, which suggests to me that this kind of training is needed a lot more, which I'd love to know what you think of this. Story one, the first event I ever went to, I went over to one of the vendors. There was only about 6 or 7, quite a small, tight-knit event. The whole big thing was a keynote area, and then the vendors was a side room. So there's only a few. I walked around all of them. Some had, socks and t-shirts and whatever else. And one of the people behind the booth just said to me, so what are your needs? And I was like, with what? Like, I need a bottle of water, or I'm hungry. Obviously, they were referring to my, sales and things like that. But that was kind of raw and just so vague that you weren't even sure what it meant. So I think a bit of that, how do we talk to people, how do we engage type thing is missing. And the other, which is about a pre-planning thing, I've been at an event before where two, you could say competitors were there, same but different type of thing, but there's always versions of them, bigger booths and bigger names, and people come over and said, so I know that you're similar to them, but how are you different?
Oh yeah.
And not everybody at the booth, I was just through knowing them, but other people focused on different markets weren't as familiar, and that's, I wouldn't be familiar with using their industry terminology unless prepared. But that's the thing, we hadn't prepared to say they're also here. There's a likelihood, albeit maybe a small one or a good one, we might get asked how are we different because they've just talked to them or they know them. Sure. So we should be armed with that beforehand. So I think that's probably, have you seen that before? Because it sounds like you guys were kind of prepared in previous events.
Oh yeah,
purposefully for that.
For High Spot, absolutely. We had one main competitor who was usually at the same events that we were. the last two events that I did, I remember they were absolutely there. In fact, they were literally directly across from us, the other side of the room. So yes, you have to be prepared. You look at who's on the floor ahead of time and know, like, okay, competitor, partner. I mean, you start going through and creating that Rolodex. But yeah, you've got to be ready because they could be walking from a competitor booth over to you, and they're going to want to know what really differentiates you. We actually had a little mini SKO after this event, which was great. And our new executive chairman was talking a lot about our differentiators, the things that truly make us different. And that's what you want to talk about. So, we're in the VoIP, lead engagement, lead management world, and there are plenty of other companies that do that. What makes you unique? So yeah, you have to be prepared for that. We did some training. Terry, who's a new member to the team here, who also, who attended the event, was, kind of talking about the ways to work the floor, the ways to engage with people, and the way to prepare ahead of time. So again, there was a decent amount of preparation that we did here from the VanillaSoft side. I'm sure other teams are doing that, but in this day and age of a lot of folks being more remote or hybrid, where they're events, where we had that cool down period of COVID where events weren't happening, I think it's really good for folks to do a lot of prep and maybe even a little bit of role play and kind of get used to being out in front of a lot of people and just talking all day long, and then standing on your feet. Make sure you hydrate. Just standing on your feet and talking all day long, because it's not easy. I'm not going to say it's the most physically demanding work in the world, but I'll tell you, I was tired. The legs get tired, the brain gets tired, and you never know who could come up to your booth at any given time. And we had some pretty phenomenal prospects come up to our booth during this event. So you have to be ready to talk about what differentiates and stuff. So I can't recommend the prep, preparing more. It's just, practice is what you have to do. And sadly, sometimes that's just not what happens in the sales world. The practice kind of gets forgotten. You just show up and do.
Yeah, I can say as well from the ones I've been to, it's not even as much just the day of the, say, 10 to 5 when the event doors are open. It's actually as well. So I'm getting up at a certain time because I've got to have travel time. I'm in a hotel. We're also meeting our superiors for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then the day ends later because you're out for dinner. It's quite a long day above the standing up all day, which you can see I'm sat down. I do not do that. So then
right,
it's
exactly.
the whole thing, isn't it? And you kind of, your brain as well, you can't go and get a water for free. It's like $4 a go 5 times a day. It's all of those little things which they are different to my routines. First world problems, I know, but I'll end up with a fried headache by the end of the day because you're in lights all day. That gets me quite bad, actually. And then you're just you're on like for a longer period of time, which is I think underestimated, particularly as it's a multi-day thing. The first day networking,
yeah,
but as it's 2-3 days, you're kind of not getting as much of a break. And I always think when I go to an event, I always think make sure you sleep well, because otherwise you're going to be in a big trouble tomorrow morning. And when I think that, I don't sleep good, but that's me.
Yeah, I lucked out where I was going from the East Coast to the West Coast, from Eastern to Pacific time. And so while I got there and lost time, I still felt like I got a good night's sleep because I woke up early, well ahead of time. So it worked out for me. Brana from our team came from Serbia, so I'm not even sure that the time difference was pretty crazy. So again, yeah, the preparation and getting ready for those events, it's a big thing. And there was, and I'm glad we did the things that we did ahead of time and got ready and got our messaging ready and the practice that we did, because we showed very well at our booth. We had a lot of traffic, a lot of badge scans. We were handing out ice cream for the folks who are watching, who saw some of the promotion that we were doing. Yes, VanillaSoft was kind of owning the name, if you will, and we were handing out some Haagen-Dazs. So it went over really well, and it had a lot of people coming to the booth. But in general, it was the deliverability topic came up a lot. So that's why folks were stopping by and understanding what we would do with that and everything. But again, everyone was prepared to kind of talk about those big topics. Had some preset meetings. We had good coverage of the booth. I thought we did extremely well.
Okay, dude, I got one more question for you,
Sure.
and then we have our 2 routine things we do before the end of the show.
Sure.
At the last event I went to, literally opposite us, I'm going to assume it was non-alcoholic, but they had a beer pump, and you can imagine everybody came to it, and it wasn't bad for us because we're literally right next to it, facing it. So the queue bled into our area, which was not a bad thing. But as you said, we did ice cream at this event, vanilla and soft. I believe even the reason for the name was, what does everyone like? Vanilla, and it makes sense. So what are some of the other wacky things you've seen people do at events in that kind of spirit, or having ice cream or having food, drink, and so on? What else is there? Anything come to mind?
Well, at this event, I'm sorry that I'm blanking on his first name at the moment, but a gentleman who basically is a TCPA attorney, last name Troutman. So he shares the last name, and he's going to kill me when he sees this on social media, but I can't think of his first name. He was kind of dressed something like the Grim Reaper. He had a big top hat on, somewhere between Alice Cooper and the Grim Reaper, and he is known to be that, as he represents folks for TCPA lawsuits. So he consults, represents folks in TCPA claims. So he's built kind of an image, if you will, and a brand. I do enjoy it. It's pretty good stuff. But that was one of the more wild get-ups that I saw. The folks across from us had a build your own catapult competition. So they had these buy them from a toy shop catapults that you had to put together and then like launch bananas into a net. I thought that was pretty cool at that one. And then up front was this lead aggregation company, data company, that had a almost like a Marble Madness. I don't know if you remember Marble Madness. I mean, might be really dating myself with that, but it was this huge marble board, and they put marbles out on the tables, the breakfast, lunch, and dinner tables, and you had these marbles that bring it to booth, whatever. And they just had this huge display where you could drop the marbles in at different stages of like the lead journey. And it was just really cool. And it was right front and center. And it was really neat. That was one of the more crazy things that I've seen. I got to be honest, sadly, at the shows, I haven't seen much nuttiness. What I would say is, some vendors really put on great after parties, right? They do some of that showcasing and events, after the after the convention, after the show, if you will. So wish I had a good zany one. It was nice to meet Mr. Troutman this year. Again, being new to the B2C space, it was nice to meet him and have him stop by our booth. And probably the most inventive attire that I've ever seen at a show. I will give him credit for that.
I think a lot of people saw him and knew exactly what that was. So that's pretty smart. I've seen wacky suits.
Yes.
That's a whole new level. So, okay, point taken. Next time I go to an event, blow up chicken outfit, Grim Reaper, somewhere in those lines.
I saw a lot of the t-shirts. I wasn't necessarily digging like, would you like to buy leads, right? And had the t-shirt on. Like, okay, I mean, fair. I mean, I guess if you're going to be there and you're walking around, it makes sense. Yeah, he kind of stole the show with the attire. I will absolutely give him credit for that, no doubt. And some of the booths were really inventive. We had a fairly simple booth, to be transparent, but we had ice cream, right? And we had a nice big setup, comfy setup. And I think one of the things that I would highly recommend to anybody, maybe I shouldn't, but we had chairs. We had comfy chairs. And I will tell you, we had a couple folks who just wanted to sit down. And they saw the ice cream, and they're like, I can sit and have an ice cream. And they were like, sign me up. So I don't want to give away all our trade secrets, but that definitely enticed a couple folks into the booth for sure.
All right, so I got a quick couple-minute segment here, and then some quick fire questions, and then we are done. If you can think of something, tell me about a time where you've had a mistake or a big challenge in your career, something, I said to Zach, our CRO, who of course, maybe a top performer like Steve has left, or we lost a big deal that we thought we were definitely going to get. Those types of things. And how did you turn it around, if something comes to mind?
Oh, well, I said if I ever write a book, it's going to be titled I've Made All the Mistakes So You Don't Have to. Because I'd buy it. I have trademark. I've made some mistakes in my day, fortunately still going strong and finding a way. But the good news is I get older, I make less and less. So that's the good news. There was a situation earlier on in my career where, and I don't want to get necessarily too terribly specific, but I was probably underselling what I was contributing to the business. I'll put it that way. I wasn't necessarily representing my own personal brand and the contributions to the business and the things and the things that I was doing to say, hey, I have executed on this strategy, and the result was, in this case, millions of dollars. And I did not necessarily set myself up to take the credit, because it's just not necessarily the type of person that I am. I kind of see those who go out there and do a ton of self-promotion, and I it's not me. I'm happy to see folks who promote themselves and promote their successes. It's not always my style. I'm kind of the let the team take the credit type person. I don't know, just the way I am. But in the business world, you do have to sometimes build that resume of the things you've done and really document. I didn't do that. And I had an opportunity that was mine that was eventually moved from me because they just kind of felt like it was happening because it was happening, not because of the strategy and the execution that I did. And I didn't document and tell the story well enough throughout the years. I gave too much of the credit to, the other teams and the other sources. So I've changed that about me. And I think that's a really important thing for anybody to do. Is it's not about gloating or bragging or being self-promoting and all of that. It's just simply about documenting your successes so that you have your own personal playbook to go back to, and that whenever challenged about why you're being successful, you have the story to tell. So a little bit of personal branding and things, but yeah, it was a tough lesson to learn, and have changed the way that I've done things moving forward.
Good lesson to learn. Yeah, I have a similar Google sheet in my personal Gmail files just somewhere. Probably haven't been into it in a while, actually. I should probably go and update that. But I do just have that little, even in prior jobs, it's good to keep, just to remind yourself, that really big client we are going to lose that handed in their notice that I somehow kept. That's still I'm still me. Like, I know I did that, or I sold X deal size, which was my record. I still did that.
Yeah.
And in the job that you're currently in as well, you can keep that for things like that.
I would challenge you again a little bit to tell the story of how it happened, though. And again, not that you're not keeping that, but I think having I had the raw numbers. Oh, look at the growth, look at the success. What I didn't have was, no, I built this strategy. I created these ideas. Here's how I executed. Here's how I formed the team. Here's the training, the coaching. So I didn't necessarily have the full framework of all the things that led to that success, to them to say, wow, you did this. You did this as the leader of this organization, of this team. And I just didn't see the need to, and I learned a hard lesson, and then in the future, I actually did that, and it worked out, to my advantage. So I see a lot of folks have brag sheets, right? They come to interviews. I've done well over 1,000 interviews. They come with the numbers. I had a recent interview with someone who not only had the brag sheet, but they had their strategy behind it. So for anybody who's going into interview who might be watching this for some reason, like, it's one thing to have the numbers of your successes. It's also like, how did you get there? What did you do to formulate a strategy and execute to actually hit those numbers? So it's nice when there's some substance behind the numbers.
Very good point. All right. Quick fire questions. Are you ready, sir?
Oh, gosh. All right.
Okay. What is the highest number of cold calls you've ever made in one day? Do you know?
I actually know exactly the number. It's 557.
557.
I was working at a mortgage company, working just raw phone numbers, and a friend of mine who kind of showed me the way, Mike, we had a contest sitting side by side who could make the most dials the one afternoon, literally.
I can tell you you're winning to date, so that's good.
I know there are people. I know we did not have predictive dialing and ratio dialing and multi-line dialing, so it was hand dialing one by one. 557 hand dials. So if somebody's got that beat, I'm sure they do. I'm curious what the number is. I know I've heard some outrageous numbers of what people do today. So
respect, much higher than the previous highest I've got. What would be the biggest deal that you've worked on in your career so far?
Wow. There were a couple of, 7-figure deals at D&B, that multi-year that I was a part of. Yeah, I would think those would be it. There's boy, let me think. Yeah, that would probably, there was a couple at D&B that were, 7-figure multi-year deals for sure.
Okay. What number would that start with?
Oh, worked on or closed?
Let's say closed for argument's sake.
Because I was gonna say worked on was definitely north of 8 digits for a multi-year agreement. No, 2, yeah, 7, yeah, over 2 million.
2 mil. Okay.
Yeah.
100 being
total contract value. Annual sub, annual right around $1 million.
okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Made a note. 100 being really good, 0 being terrible. Rate your cold email skills for me.
Oh. 75.
75. All right. What about cold calling?
Oh. 88.
88 specific. What about management?
91.
91. Okay. You've got a choice to use either social media or to send a video to reach out to a prospect. Which would you do?
Video.
Video. Good stuff. What time do you wake up in the morning?
Get out of bed or wake up.
That's what everyone always says. Let's say out of bed, because that's
out
actually
of bed. 8-ish. Wake up around anywhere between 7 and 7:30, and get on my phone and start doing stuff. And out of bed by 8.
Okay, that's a bit more respectable. I feel at peace with that. I've been absolutely demolished by everyone else, so thank you for some.
Oh no, listen, I've been working with a lot of West Coast startups for a while, so my clock has shifted a little bit, where a lot of my stuff is afternoon and goes into the evening. So I'm getting up. I get to get up a little bit later, but I work a little bit later, which is totally fine. Now we're kind of shifting back where I'm starting to get up a little bit more earlier and earlier. So.
Good stuff. Me too. What did you want to be when you grew up? What was that I'm a kid dream job? What was that for you?
Oh man. Well, either a pro soccer player, pro footballer, an Apache or an A-10 pilot. Those are probably the ones. Maybe a professional skier at one point too.
Very cool.
Yeah.
How close did you get to any of them out of interest?
Nowhere near.
Fair enough.
Sadly. Yeah, nowhere near.
Fair enough. And last one, who could you recommend to me to have on the podcast that you might be able to introduce me to?
I don't know if we can get him, but our new executive chairman, Louis, should absolutely be on. I'm going to call him out. Hopefully he doesn't get mad at me, but I would love to have him on. I don't know if Mr. Troutman has done a podcast either. He'd be a really interesting guest. I know he's incredibly popular and has a big social media presence of his own, but I've been reading up on some of his stuff, and it's incredibly interesting, especially given what's going on with the new FCC ruling, the 1-to-1 consent, and some of the things that are going to be happening over this course of the next year. He'd be a very interesting guest. But Louis is a breadth and depth of knowledge, so he would be great. And of course, Zach is, who I don't think I have to introduce you to. Maybe you've already recorded with Zach.
Yeah.
But Zach has incredible experience as well.
Very good. All right, sir. Thank you very much for being on. I appreciate it. Before you jump, where could people who are wanting to say hello, ask you a question, maybe find and connect with you?
Oh my gosh, on LinkedIn. That's the easiest place to get me. By all means, just look for me on LinkedIn, Steve Trout on LinkedIn, and yes, you'll see the fabulous hairline and a little less facial hair. But easiest way to get me there, and would love to connect with people and talk more about what VanillaSoft does.
Brilliant. Thank you, sir. So you have reached the end of the episode. If you stuck around this long, congratulations. You have an excellent attention span. Well done. That's it. We will see you on the next one, guys. Thanks very much. See you in a bit.